Hey everybody, ready for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at this podcast episode called Unlock Your Fluent English Brain.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, and it's really packed with tips. I was listening to it earlier and I was like, whoa, there are some real gems in here.
Awesome.
So I'm really excited to get into this.
Yeah, me too.
And of course, I got an expert here with me to help us break it all down. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure.
I'm really excited to be here. And I think, this is a really fascinating topic, language acquisition. And I think we're going to uncover some really valuable insights for your listeners today.
Absolutely. I think this episode really does a good job of zeroing in on a problem that so many English learners face. It's that frustrating thing where you understand the rules, you can read English, you can listen to English.
Yeah.
But when it comes to actually speaking, it's like your mind goes blank.
Yeah, it's the worst.
Yeah. And the episode uses this phrase, I understand, but I can't speak.
Ah.
Do you ever felt that way?
Absolutely. I think it's incredibly common. Yeah. And what's so interesting is that it's often not about intelligence or a lack of knowledge. It's really not.
Yeah.
The episode highlights 3 key reasons why this happens, and I think they're going to really resonate with your listeners.
Okay, lay it on me. What are these big fluency blockers?
So the first one is overthinking. A lot of learners just get trapped in this cycle of translating every word in their head instead of just thinking directly in English.
Right.
It's like trying to have a conversation while running a mental marathon with a dictionary strapped to your back.
Whoa. That's a powerful image.
Right.
It's exhausting even thinking about it.
It really is.
Yes.
Okay, and then the second roadblock is a lack of practice. You can spend hours studying grammar and vocabulary. But if you're not actively speaking, it's like learning to swim by reading a manual. You've got to jump in the pool.
I am so guilty of that. I get so caught up in learning the perfect English that I forget to just use it.
I think we all do. Okay, and then that leads us to the third roadblock, which is fear of making mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
This one is huge. So many learners just hold back because they're worried about sounding silly or making errors. But in reality, that fear is what keeps them stuck.
It's true. It's like we're afraid to let our English be imperfect.
Yeah.
Even though native speakers make mistakes all the time.
All the time, yeah.
But what I found really intriguing was this idea that the episode puts forward, that even adults can learn languages like kids. How is that even possible? We're so set in our ways.
Right. It all comes down to neural pathways. So imagine your brain as a dense forest. Every time you learn and use English, you're carving a path through that forest.
Okay.
The more you walk that path, clearer and wider it becomes.
I like that.
Yeah. Consistent practice actually changes the physical structure of your brain, making it easier and faster to think and speak in English.
So we can rewire our brains for fluency. It's like we're building a superhighway for English in our mind.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great way to put it.
Okay. I'm feeling inspired.
Good.
But how do we actually make this happen? What are the concrete steps we can take to start carving those English pathways?
So the podcast outlines 6 powerful techniques, and they're all about rewiring your brain for fluency. They might sound simple, but with consistent practice, they can be incredibly effective.
Okay, I'm ready. Hit me with those techniques.
All right, so the first one is called the no translation rule, and it's all about breaking free from that habit of mentally translating everything. It's like switching your brain's operating system to English.
Okay.
So for example, imagine you're describing your morning routine. Instead of thinking, I wake up, I brush my teeth, you think, I'm waking up, I'm brushing my teeth. You're living in the language, even for the mundane stuff.
Okay, so it's about shifting from translating to thinking.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Okay.
What's next?
All right, so next up is talking to yourself in English.
Oh.
I know it might sound a little strange, but it's incredibly effective for solidifying those neural pathways. So narrate your day. Describe what you're doing. Practice forming sentences naturally, all in English.
So like what kind of things?
Even something as simple as like, I'm making coffee, I'm adding sugar. This smells amazing.
It's like giving your English brain a constant workout, even when you're alone.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. What else?
All right, so the third technique is called the 5-second rule. And it's all about pushing yourself out of your comfort zone.
5-second rule.
Yes.
All right, I like it already.
So when someone asks you a question in English, challenge yourself to respond within 5 seconds.
5 seconds. That seems really fast.
I know.
What if I don't know the perfect answer?
That's the point.
Oh.
It's not about perfection. It's about training your brain to react quickly and spontaneously in English. Even if your answer isn't grammatically perfect or you don't use the most sophisticated vocabulary, the act of responding quickly helps build those automatic pathways in your brain.
So it's more about thinking on your feet and getting those English gears turning.
Exactly. It's like doing sprints for your English brain. And with practice, you'll find yourself responding faster and more confidently.
Awesome.
Now for the fourth technique. Have you ever heard of shadowing?
Shadowing, yeah. That's where you mimic native speakers, right?
You got it.
Okay.
So find a podcast or a video or even a movie in English and try repeating what the speakers are saying.
Okay.
Copy their rhythm, their pronunciation, their tone, everything. It might feel a little awkward at first, but it's a fantastic way to train your brain and your mouth to work together seamlessly.
It's almost like you're borrowing their fluency for a little while.
Exactly.
Wow, I like that.
And over time, you'll find that those patterns and rhythms start to become more natural in your own speech.
Okay, cool.
Now, the fifth technique is all about thinking in phrases, not just individual words.
Okay.
So instead of memorizing lists of vocabulary, try learning common phrases and sentence patterns, for example. Instead of just thinking happy, think, I'm feeling really happy today, or that makes me so happy.
Well, that's a good tip. I've noticed that native speakers use a lot of set phrases and expressions. It's like they have these pre-built blocks of language that they can easily put together.
Exactly.
Okay.
And by learning these phrases, you're not only expanding your vocabulary, you're also internalizing the natural rhythm and flow of English.
So it's like learning the chunks of English
Yeah.
rather than just the individual words.
Yes.
I see how that would make speaking feel much smoother.
Absolutely. And finally, the most important technique of all, speak every day.
Knew you were going to say that. But I think a lot of learners struggle with finding opportunities to practice, especially if they don't live in an English-speaking country or have a language partner.
I understand that challenge.
Yeah.
But the good news is, there are so many ways to incorporate speaking into your daily life, even if you're on your own. You can record yourself talking about a topic you're interested in. You could try out AI chatbots for conversation practice, or join online English groups. The key is to make speaking a habit, even if it's just for a few minutes each day.
So even small amounts of practice can make a difference.
Absolutely. Think of it like exercising a muscle. Even a few minutes of lifting weights each day can make a difference over time. The same principle applies to language learning.
Cool. Okay, that's really encouraging. These techniques seem very practical, and I can already see how they would help build those fluency pathways in the brain. But I think a lot of learners also struggle with the mental side of things, the fear and the self-doubt that can creep in.
Oh, yeah. You're absolutely right. And the podcast addresses this head on. It reminds us that mistakes are a natural part of the learning process, even for native speakers.
Yeah, it's so easy to get caught up in that perfectionist mindset, especially when you're learning a new language. We tend to be much harder on ourselves than we would be on a friend or a child who's learning.
Right. It's so true.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that fluency is a journey, not a destination. And every mistake you make is an opportunity to learn and grow instead of beating yourself up. Try to see those mistakes as stepping stones on your path to fluency.
Okay, so how can we shift our mindset to embrace those mistakes instead of fearing them?
Well, one helpful tip from the podcast is to reframe mistakes as progress. Every time you stumble, you're actually learning something new about the language. And with practice, those stumbles will become less frequent and less noticeable.
I like that. It takes the pressure off
Yeah.
and allows us to enjoy the learning process more.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So it's like instead of viewing them as failures,
Mm-hmm.
we can see them as valuable feedback
Right.
that helps us refine our skills.
Exactly.
It's all part of the process.
And the podcast also emphasizes that fluency is about communication, not perfection.
Okay.
Think about it. When someone tries to speak your native language, even if their grammar isn't perfect, you appreciate their effort, right?
Yeah, of course.
You focus on the message they're trying to convey.
That's true.
Yeah.
I never thought about it that way before, but it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
We're so quick to judge ourselves, but we wouldn't apply those same standards to someone else.
Yeah, and remember, the more you speak, the less those little mistakes will matter.
Right.
The key is to build that momentum and keep those English pathways firing.
Okay, so how can we deal with, the nerves, that fear that can come up when we're trying to speak?
Well, the podcast actually gives a really simple but powerful tip. Slow down your speech.
Yeah.
And take a deep breath.
Oh, I love that. Like hit the pause button.
Exactly.
Give yourself a moment to just regroup.
Yeah, when we're nervous, we tend to speak faster,
Yeah.
and our thoughts get all jumbled.
Yeah.
So by slowing down and taking a breath, we give ourselves space to think clearly and articulate our ideas more effectively.
It's like giving your brain a second to catch up.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And the podcast also talked about surrounding yourself with English as much as possible, like
Yeah.
listening to music, watching movies, reading books.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just creating that immersive environment, even if you're not physically in an English-speaking country.
Absolutely.
Right.
The more you expose yourself to the language,
Mm-hmm.
the more natural it will become.
It's like developing an ear for music. The more you listen, the better you become at recognizing the patterns and nuances.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And remember, every fluent English speaker started as a beginner.
Well, that's a good point.
Nobody is born speaking perfect English.
It's easy to get discouraged when you see other people speaking fluently, but it's important to remember that they were once in our shoes. They put in the time and the effort, and they developed their skills over time.
Exactly.
Okay.
Fluency is a skill, not a talent.
Mhm.
It's something you can absolutely achieve with consistent practice and the right mindset.
So the key takeaway here is that fluency is within reach. For anyone who's willing to put in the work, and this podcast has given us some really amazing techniques to help us build those fluency pathways in our brains. So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Think about your biggest fluency frustration. Is it feeling tongue-tied in conversations, struggling to keep up with fast-paced speech, or maybe it's that nagging fear of making mistakes that holds you back? Whatever it is, I challenge you to pick one technique from today's deep dive and try it out today. Maybe try shadowing your favorite English podcast for 10 minutes, or challenge yourself to think in English while you're doing a routine task, like cooking dinner or something.
And remember, it's not about making huge leaps overnight. It's about taking small, consistent steps that will gradually transform your brain and your confidence.
Yeah, those little steps add up.
They really do.
Okay, so I have a question for you listening.
Okay.
What is one tiny change you can make today that will set you on that path to fluency? It could be as simple as writing down a few English phrases you want to practice, or having a short conversation with yourself in the mirror. Every step counts.
Every step counts.
That's it for today's deep dive. I hope you found this episode helpful and inspiring. Remember, fluency is a journey, and the most important thing is to keep moving forward, even if it's just one small step at a time. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Yeah, and you know what else the podcast said? They suggested surrounding yourself with English as much as possible.
Yeah.
Like listening to music, watching movies, reading books, creating that immersive environment, even if you're not physically in an English-speaking country.
Right. It's like building that English world around you.
Exactly.
Like that.
And remember, every fluent English speaker started as a beginner.
Right. Nobody's born speaking perfect English.
Nobody.
It's true. It's easy to get discouraged when you see other people speaking fluently.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's important to remember that they were once in our shoes. They put in the time and the effort, and they developed their skills over time.
Yeah, fluency is a skill, not a talent.
Mhm.
And it's something you can absolutely achieve with consistent practice and the right mindset.
So the key takeaway here is that fluency is within reach for anyone who's willing to put in the work.
Absolutely.
And this podcast has given us some amazing techniques to help us build those fluency pathways in our brains. So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Think about your biggest fluency frustration. Is it feeling tongue-tied in conversations, struggling to keep up with fast-paced speech? Or maybe it's that nagging fear of making mistakes that holds you back. Whatever it is, I challenge you to pick one technique from today's deep dive and try it out today. Like maybe try shadowing your favorite English podcast for 10 minutes, or challenge yourself to think in English while you're doing a routine task, like cooking dinner or something.
Right, and remember, it's not about making huge leaps overnight. It's about taking those small, consistent steps that will gradually transform your brain and your confidence.
Yeah, those little steps add up.
They really do.
So I have a question for you listening. What is one tiny change you can make today that will set you on that path to fluency? It could be as simple as writing down a few English phrases you want to practice, or having a short conversation with yourself in the mirror. Every step counts.
Every step counts.
All right, that's it for today's deep dive. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time for another one.